of the ANA Application Development webinar series on planning and preparation. My name is Rondell Clay. I am the Regional Director of the ANA Eastern Regional Training and Technical Assistance Center. I have been an ANA TA provider for over 13 years. I'm a member of the Sistanwap Tnoyate. Candy Carmi is my co-presenter. Candy?
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Candy Carmi, and I'm the Technical Assistance Specialist with the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center. I've been with the team since roughly 2006 now, and I'm a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. Not all of you may be too familiar with the Administration for Native Americans, so I want to give you a little bit of an overview. This webinar is being presented by the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, which is a resource of the Administration for Native Americans. ANA is a program located within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and is under the Administration for Children and Families. ANA serves all Native Americans, including federally recognized tribes, American Indian and Alaska Native organizations, Native Hawaiian organizations, and Native populations throughout the Pacific Basin. ANA promotes self-sufficiency for Native Americans by providing discretionary grant funding for community-based projects, as well as training and technical assistance to eligible tribes and Native organizations in 3 program areas: social and economic development strategies, also known as SEDS, Native languages, and environmental regulatory enhancement.
ANA holds weekly webinars on a variety of topics, including ACF initiatives, program success stories, and application development. Webinars are held every Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you go to the ANA website and click on the Events tab, you can find a schedule of the webinars. As mentioned earlier, this is part 1 of the Application Development Series. Part 2 will take place April 25th and will cover the 6 elements of a good grant. Part 3 will cover project integration on May 9th, and Part 4 will cover submitting the application on May 25th. Today, we're going to be covering a number of topics regarding application preparation. Application preparation takes a lot of work. This includes many activities before you even begin writing the application. Our topics today focus on the pre-writing activities, such as determining eligibility, understanding your organizational capacity, defining your community, community involvement, determining internal and external resources, and next steps.
It's quite a bit of work to put together an application, so make sure you're eligible before you begin writing. ANA funds both tribes and Native organizations. You need to determine if you are eligible by checking the section of the funding opportunity announcement entitled Eligible Applicants. I want to mention here that ANA does not fund individuals or for-profit organizations. Next, you want to check with your administration or planning department to see if your organization currently has any ANA grants. Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance Numbers, also called CFDA numbers, can be found on page 1 of the funding opportunity announcement. If you look at the screen, there's page 1 of 2 funding opportunity announcements. On the left is the language preservation and maintenance, and on the right is Esther Martinez. The CFDA number can be found at the bottom of the page, and as you can see in our example, both of them have the same number. so therefore you could not have both grants simultaneously. Similarly, sustainable employment and economic development strategies, also called SEEDS, and Native Asset Building Initiative funding opportunity announcements will be released later in the spring, and both have the same CFDA number as SEDS. So again, you could not have those projects running simultaneously.
There are different approaches to grant writing. When using a single grant writer approach, a decision needs to be made who the single author should be. Are you going to use a current employee or hire a consultant? When using a consultant, be sure they have a good background of the program and the community they are writing for. It's not uncommon for consultants to get creative with approaches only to find out that the program can't implement the project the way it was written. With a team approach, it's important that a thorough review be done by someone not associated with the writing of the application to make sure that the application is cohesive and written in one voice. Here it's not uncommon to see different numbers depending on which part of the application you're looking at, or different titles for different positions within the application. And that's why it's important to have that secondary review. Whether using a single grant writer or pulling everything together as a team, it's a good idea to have someone overseeing the process and making sure everything is on target and getting done. There's only a finite time that you have to complete the application and get it submitted. You have determined who's putting the application together. Now it's imperative that you have organizational buy-in from both tribal leadership as well as any departments or programs that will be involved in the implementation of the project, because you'll have to supply documentation of the buy-in for the application. The buy-in is also important to the management of the grant. It's important to understand organizational capacity so that when you're writing about it in the application, you plan for the correct number of people to implement the grant. It's important to understand the capabilities of the tribe or organization the grant is going to be written for. For instance, is there a strategic or long-range plan? If not, what other kinds of documents exist that give insight to the problems that need to be addressed in the community? In addition, what are the administrative and financial capabilities? What impact are those capabilities or lack thereof going to have on the grant application? Attached with the handout, each of you should have been sent a tool that can be used to assess organizational capacity. This tool is not required by ANA. It's just a tool to help with the determination of grant administrative capacity for the application. Another preparation issue is determining if the tribe or organization is registered with the System for Award Management, or SAM, and grants.gov. There is a lot of information that needs to be gathered before you can register for SAM. Therefore, you need to get going, as it takes several weeks to get fully registered. And finally, application submission via grants.gov is required unless you obtain a waiver. You need to look at what your internet connectivity and technology situation is. Do you have adequate internet connectivity and the right equipment to apply via grants.gov? If not, you should research and apply for a grants.gov waiver. Information is contained in the funding opportunity announcement. The waiver request needs to be submitted no later than 2 weeks before the deadline. So do it as soon as possible.
Community involvement is mentioned quite a bit in the funding opportunity announcement, and it's an integral component of project planning, project implementation, and even after the project. For the purposes of this webinar, we're focusing on community involvement in the planning stage.
Thank you, Candy. There are a number of different methods for conducting community involvement. Today we're going to talk about the nominal group process. It is a widely used method for medium to large groups to synthesize and prioritize information from participants. It is a low-cost, interactive way to engage stakeholders and can be done during community meetings or when meeting with other stakeholders such as elders. Begin by forming groups of 5 to 8 participants. Assign a facilitator and a recorder to each group. The facilitator gives the participants a written statement of the problem the intended project will be addressing, such as, the most important problem faced by our community in the past 3 years are. Participants then silently write down their ideas about the problem on the index card without any group discussion. Give about 5 to 10 minutes. When the majority become noisy or restless, move on to the group discussion where a recorder captures responses from group participants on a flip chart. Once all ideas have been recorded on the flip chart, encourage each group to discuss the ideas. The group should clarify, compare, discuss, and approve all ideas. Agreements or disagreements with ideas may be encouraged, but should be controlled by the facilitator to ensure that heated debate does not develop. No guns allowed in the meeting. Discussion continues on the methods to reduce or eliminate problems, and the members of each group will select their top 5 priority areas through a voting process. Next, each group facilitator reports out on the group priorities to the entire meeting. The entire population votes to determine the top 5 problem priorities that could or should be addressed. Discussion continues on methods to reduce or eliminate these problems and becomes the basis for the tribe or organization's project. Solutions are suggested and community impacts discussed. We focused on the nominal group process today. However, you can find more information about other methods listed in the Project Planning and Development Manual available on the ANA website. If you use the URL listed on the bottom of the slide, it'll take you straight to the manual.
Now that you've decided how you'll gather information from your community, what information do you need to get from them? The first question you should pose is, what problem are we going to address? You'll probably get quite a few ideas, but you need to get the community to help you narrow it down to one. What long-range goal is being met? What do you expect to happen during the course of the project? And finally, what is your project goal? These questions should be answered by the community and will guide the planning of the project.
Documenting community involvement in the project planning process is essential and required by the FOAs. We have listed some potential kinds of documentation here. Meeting minutes with sign-in sheets, agenda with sign-in sheets, survey summary, petitions, letters of commitment, and letters of support. This year, there is an emphasis on documenting community buy-in. Therefore, letters of support from potential project participants are going to be required. Documentation takes time to gather, so get started right away.
We mentioned community quite a bit. The community your project serves doesn't necessarily have to be the entire community. It can be a subset of the main community, such as elders or children between the ages of 5 to 12. You want to be specific when describing your community. Make sure that a reader has no question as to who the project beneficiaries will be. You also want to get some letters of support from potential project participants. If you're doing a project for young children, get letters of support from some of their parents. If you have a project that focuses on high school age students, get letters from them indicating that they're behind the project and are willing to participate. We've seen projects that have struggled getting participants because the target audience wasn't involved in the planning of the project.
Now that you've selected your community, it's time to get down to the determining of the problem statement. Keep in mind, a problem statement identifies one current negative community condition discussed during a community-based planning process, such as the nominal group process that we just talked about, and explains why this problem was selected over others. Describe the current negative condition in measurable terms. Include quantified indicators, numbers, include research, surveys or studies, and cite sources that support the community's definition of the problem. Provide convincing justification. Give its impact on the community. Don't just say unemployment is high in the community. How high is it? Look at our example at the bottom of the page. Our community of 500 employable members has a 60% unemployment rate because their job skills and experience do not match current job requirements. It is clear to a reviewer that 300 people in this community are unemployed, a severe problem. Another writing tip for you: bold your problem statement so it's easily identified by reviewers when they're going through your application.
Your community long-range goal should relate to solving or improving your problem statement. To find your organization's long-range goal, research current vision statements or see if you can locate strategic planning documents, or look for resolutions that include long-range goals that relate to your problem statement. What if you don't have planning documents or resolutions that provide long-range goals? You might want to take a look at your Constitution and see if you can find wording that will work for you. In our example on the screen, all community members are employed and able to support family members without social services. If this was your long-range goal and you happen to have found it in your strategic plan, you might state it as, in the approved strategic plan of 2012, one of our long-range goals was, and then cite this long-range goal. So if you do have a source for the long-range goal, it's a good idea to reference that source.
The project goal is a basic description of the purpose of the project. In other words, a reduction or a resolution of the problem you identified earlier. The project goal should reflect positive changes in the set of conditions desired by the community after the problem is addressed. The goal statement represents the result of the successful completion of the project. When describing your goal, clearly describe how the project relates to one or more of the community's long-range goals. The statement should be brief and to the point as well as realistic. Remember, your goal determines the scope of your project, so do not state your project will accomplish more than it possibly can within the project time frame.
Well, to recap, and we'll go over that project goal again, is you need to demonstrate a clear relationship between your problem, the long-range goal, and the project goal. Each is supposed to build on the other to form a strong connection. The lack of that relationship is one of the first pitfalls in an application that reviewers notice. So now let's get it right. In our example, the problem identified high unemployment in the community. The long-range community goal was that all community members be employed and able to support their families. And the project goal is to decrease the unemployment rate, which will help community members support family members. So all three components tie one to the other.
Now that you have defined your problem and have your project goal, it's time to look at what resources are available to you to alleviate the problem. Assessing your available resources will help determine the best strategy for implementing your project and should be part of your community assessment process. Begin this analysis with the resources that currently exist within the community. Every project and every strategy is different and requires a different set of resources. Those resources can be human, equipment, supplies, materials, and/or facilities. In addition to those needs, the following questions should be answered. Who is addressing some of the identified problem or problem components now? How well are they doing? What aspect of the problem remains to be addressed? This question identifies unaddressed conditions or gaps in the situation so that you can formulate a strategy for addressing these continued unmet problem areas without duplicating existing services. And finally, what resources can be leveraged so that the project expands capabilities by adding resources that improve the chances of success? Sit down with department or division staff that may be involved in the implementation of the grant and brainstorm both internal and external resources that might be tapped to assist in your project. You can also utilize the administrative capacity information you collected to help with this section. This is the first step in locating potential partners for your project.
In identifying resources, you definitely want to look for partnerships. ANA defines partnerships as agreements between two or more parties that will support the development and implementation of the proposed project. Partnerships include other community-based organizations or associations, tribes, federal and state agencies, and private or non-private organizations. Partnerships can be internal, say with departments or programs within your organization, or external with other organizations. Partners and your organization should have a mutual interest in the project's success. Partnerships play a huge role in your organization's ability to sustain your project. It also shows that other organizations see the importance of what you intend to accomplish. Once you've determined who you are partnering with, you want to get that arrangement in writing so that what the expectations are to avoid future misunderstandings. We have listed 3 types of documentation that can be done. The first is the least formal way of documenting partnership expectations. It's a letter which spells out what is expected from each partner and puts an estimated dollar amount to the effort anticipated. The other 2 types of documents are more formal documents that take more time and effort to complete. Oftentimes, they're not finalized because parties cannot agree on the language. Use whatever works for your organization, but just make sure that all documents are signed by the partners.
We have covered the basic steps that need to be accomplished before the actual application writing begins. Documentation of community input is required. You have a finite time to put together an application. Therefore, we suggest developing a timeline and making assignments so everybody working on the application is clear about their duties and due dates. Depending on the scope of the project, it could take a year or more to gather all the required planning documentation. Then, of course, there's the writing, which can take several months. Don't procrastinate. Get started now.
ANA's website has a wealth of information. I'd recommend that you bookmark it and add it to your favorites. For further information on the topics discussed today, visit the ANA website. On that website, if you go to the Resources tab, you'll find PDF files of training manuals that you can download. You can also view these webinars as well as other webinars, and you can find information on other funding opportunities. And if all else fails and you still require additional assistance, you can always contact Rondell, myself, or your regional technical assistance provider for additional assistance.
Question and answers. We're now going to open up for questions. Either type your questions in using the question box on your control panel, or if you are on the phone or have a microphone, please raise your hand and I'll call on you one at a time. Please note, we will not be answering questions about the funding opportunity announcement. We know everybody is waiting for them, but we don't have a crystal ball and we can't provide any information to you today. I'm sorry. So, is there anybody out there with questions? Nancy Carnley. Nancy? I've got you unmuted, Nancy, but apparently you don't have a microphone. If you could type your question in so that we can cover it. Beth Harness? I guess the same is true for you, Beth. If you could type your question in, I'll be glad to cover it. Okay. We have Laura Spann who asked about the fourth webinar and if it's really scheduled for Saturday, May 25th. And the answer is no, it's not. It's scheduled for Thursday, May 23rd. Thank you for catching that typo. It's Thursday, May 23rd is when the fourth of the series is going to be held. I have a question about describing the pros and cons and differences as to which language grant to apply for. Carla, could you please call us and we can go over your situation? It's a little bit more in depth than what we can cover over the phone right now. Nancy Carnley. We had a fire several years ago and we're trying to replace all of our documentation. Can we apply for a SEDS grant? Yes, of course you can. I'm not sure where you're located, but call your TA provider and I'm sure that they can help you with the first steps of putting that all together. I have a question from Ruth Dudley Chippewa. Are there any additional requirements besides community member and Ruth, I'm not sure what LOSs are that we should anticipate and work on? If you could spell out, letters of support, thank you. Any documentation on the planning process that we had mentioned earlier will definitely be of help. Allison Slavic. I missed one thing you said about who is addressing the problem now and how are they doing. Can you repeat or elaborate on this again and how it fits into proposal development? That relates to looking at internal and external resources and avoiding duplication of services and hopefully filling in gaps in those kinds of problems. I hope that answered your question, Allison. Laura Spann, community documentation. We held a series of immersion workshops and had participants sign photo releases with confidential info. We did not use a sign-in sheet. Can we make a list of people who participated and include a redacted sample of the release? That would work just fine. Please make sure you have dates of when that those series of workshops took place and possibly an agenda for them as well, but that should work fine for you. And Kelly, I refuse to massacre your last name, so I'm not going to say it. Can you go over the community buy-in and facilitating that again? What can we do to get more community buy-in? There are a number of ways of doing that, of holding. One thing that we didn't mention was holding focus groups, making presentations at community meetings, and getting documentation from those meeting planners about the meeting and your being on the agenda, taking notes from people when you're answering questions about your presentation, calling specific meetings just regarding the proposal planning process is another way. And then if meetings are not, if your community is so spread out and you can't hold meetings, then doing a survey or potentially having a petition go around and get signed by community members. So there are a number of different ways that you can do that, Kelly, and I strongly suggest that you go and look at the Project Planning and Development Manual. It'll give you some more ideas. I have a question on how you find out who your regional technical advisor is. If you live in the state of North Dakota and all the way down to Texas and any of the states east of that line, you are in the eastern region. So North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and everything east is the eastern region. Anything west of that line is the western region. And then if you're in Alaska, there's an Alaska regional provider, and if you're in the Pacific, there's a Pacific regional provider. And if you need any of the contact information for the TA providers, they're all up on the ANA website. You guys are keeping me busy today. Thank you. If someone cannot attend the pre-application workshops this year, what do you recommend for that person? Are there any resources specific to the pre-application workshops on the ANA website? Well, Ruth, that's why we're holding this application webinar series, is to hopefully fill in some of the gaps because the number of workshops that we usually put on during the year have been cut back because of funding issues. So these webinars will be posted, and hopefully you'll be able to attend the entire series, and you should get the basics that one would normally get a little more in detail at the training.
Rondell, the pre-application manual is also up now on ANA's website. So she could also download that pre-application manual and walk through that.
Okay. I have a question from Beth. Do you know if the number of leveraged resources will be used as an impact indicator this year? It's not a formal indicator, but yes, ANA does track the number of leveraged resources. She also asked, do you know if integration is going to be added as a review criteria per the Notice of Public Comment? I know that the Notice of Public Comment did say that it was going to be added as a criterion, but until the FOAs come out, I can't tell you for sure. Okay, I have a question from Kate Eli. Can you define what constitutes community input? For example, does a work session with 5 tribal members in a commission constitute community group process? Well, that certainly is a community group process, but it also depends on your project and who you define your community as. And that's one reason why we talked on this webinar about defining your community and how important it is. So if you're working on some project that is very specific, say an environmental issue, and that commission is one of the governing boards over that issue, then yes, meeting with them and their work on that would be would meet the definition for community input. Matthew Ing, Pacific has a webinar on community involvement in the archive. Thanks, Matt. So if you go to www.anapacificbasin.org/ANA-training webinar-archive, you'll be able to find the community involvement webinar that Pacific has. Do you know if sustainability will be required as a separate document or integrated into the 20-page maximum? There is no 20-page maximum, or at least that's what the Notice of Public Comment said, that they were changing the required number of pages. But yes, it's a part of your project narrative. It isn't necessarily a standalone document. It's part of your project narrative. Remember, the NOPIC also mentioned that there will only be 2 files that are going to be uploaded this year into grants.gov. So you need to be prepared for how you're going to group your different files together. You can't upload more than 2 files. Carla, if you email me, I'll send you a copy of the Notice for Public Comment. It is closed. It closed on March 28th, and so we're just waiting for the FOA with the final to be final. Michael Berger asks, how many community meetings should be held to gather stakeholder input for the language grants? There's no specific number, Michael. It depends on the information that you get from your community when you're meeting. It may be 1 or 2, it may be 4 or 5. It really depends on your situation in your community and what you got done at each one of those meetings. Okay, I think that questions have finally slowed down. Well, I hope you found this webinar useful. Candy, do you have any parting words?
Well, for the last question with regard to language projects, if it's a project that they're teaching the language, they definitely would need to get a little bit more community involvement in than if it was a project where they were maybe developing curriculum. We've seen a number of projects that were involving teaching, and really the community wasn't that interested in learning the language. and they lack participants. So if he needs to look at what type of projects he's doing and base the number of meetings that he has on what he's doing too.
Thanks, Candy. Okie dokie. Thank you for participating. Please take advantage of the entire webinar series if you can. And again, the part 4 is May 23rd, not May 25th. If you just kind of flip the 5 around, it almost looks like a 3. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, if you'd please take time to fill out the survey that you will receive immediately following this webinar. We greatly value your opinion and want to provide you information that's useful to you. This concludes our webinar. Have a great afternoon, everyone.